What's going on?
Well, it's raining and cold
On this cold,
outside.
rainy day.
Yeah, you get the MOE weatherman here.
Yeah.
I
We got to start it off with weather, don't we?
I always bring that up, don't you, Paul? When you
Yeah.
ask me how things are going, I talk about the weather. So
But we got a lot to talk about today. There's a lot going on in the state.
yes, politics.
But a bunch of bills going through or being argued about in
Right.
the legislature, and then some stuff going on with Spruce budworm. So
Yeah.
one of them is the constitutional right to hunt and fish, which we'll get to here in a little bit.
Yeah.
So I got to thank actually Gary Drinkwater. He's a representative from Milford. He's the one that kind of pointed me towards this recent session that was going on in the legislature, which is pretty interesting.
Right.
So we'll go over some of that. It's pretty informative, but we got to talk about a little bit of fishing.
Haven't been fishing much.
It's been a little bit slow.
Yeah. Yeah.
We had a great time with Joe.
Yeah, we had
Great fishing trip with Joe.
Joe's I always tell Joe he's a true Mainer in
His humor, everything.
Yeah, everything. His
Everything about
work ethic and his humor and stuff. Joe is a true Mainer.
Yeah.
So, and a good guy.
So we caught some nice fish. Not a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
wouldn't say
No,
it's been-
the fishing's been actually slow, Paul. I've gone a few times since, and I've done very little. It's been slow.
Everyone I've talked to has said the same.
Yeah.
It's been weird conditions.
Yeah.
We've had some days in the 80s.
Yeah.
I got a lot of sun the other day.
Yeah.
And then it goes right back to windy, rainy, and cold.
Yeah.
So
It's 50
kinda
degrees today
Yeah.
and raining. So it's
Run the AC one day and turn the
heat on the
heat
next.
on the next day.
Yeah, and that's
So-
exactly what the heat's on in the house and
Yeah.
in the vehicle. So
And the water conditions haven't, like when we fished, the water conditions weren't
no, it was tough to fish.
weren't
It
good.
was
Muddy and
a lot of debris on the water. We had a lot of high winds and heavy rainfall, which the water conditions weren't good.
yeah. I
So-
wonder if any of that had to do with the cutting that they're doing.
And that
You know?
could be too, because along some of the brooks that run into the lake, they've cut
Yeah.
pretty hard, and there's definitely some runoff going on.
Yeah. Which we'll talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I've had a few people ask about like kind of what are my thoughts on, because they're going to be spraying for spruce budworm if they haven't already.
Right.
There was kind of a range of dates.
Yeah,
there.
I was telling
They
you
were
the
gonna-
window they said was May 26th through June 25th,
Okay.
and that was heavily dependent on weather conditions. No rain and light winds. So yeah.
So we'll talk about a little bit about the product that they use to
Yeah.
treat for that.
Yeah.
Which is, it's kind of interesting, but
Yeah,
Well-
I don't know the we'll get to that.
Yeah. So you went fishing the other day, caught a nice salmon.
Yeah,
Mom
I
sent me a
did.
picture.
I went to a sister lake up where the camp is and got a nice, probably a couple pounds, fat 18-incher and stuff.
fat salmon.
We didn't fish real long, few hours.
It was hot that day.
It
wasn't
was,
it?
but
Yeah.
you know, Paul, it wasn't hot on the lake. The water temperature was in the low to mid 50s, and so the air coming off the water, even on an 80-degree day, it feels cool out there
Yeah.
in the boat.
I had a few years back that day that the ice had just gone out, but we had 80-something degree temps with really just a light breeze, not a lot of wind. I still wore my jacket most of the
Yes,
day, and I had people
you will
asking
in
me,
May.
like, "What are you doing wearing a jacket?" It was like 85 degrees out. It's like not on the water.
And it's supposed to be up near 90 this week.
Oh, is it really?
Yeah, 87 Wednesday, I think.
Okay. Yeah, I saw Wednesday was going to be the
87 degrees. So
nicest day. So
yeah, the weather is definitely in Maine is bipolar.
Oh my God, it's all over. One
it's
extreme
all
to the
over
next.
map.
One extreme to the next.
So yeah,
So we'll talk. Yeah, there's some stuff going on. I think it was May 29th, the session
yes,
in the legislature.
yeah,
And pretty interesting. There was actually three big things they were discussing. So the potential $5 increase to licenses,
LD 77,
LD 77. There was a Sunday hunting bill that
Yep.
they were discussing.
LD 439,
Yep. And then the constitutional right to hunt and fish,
LD 820.
which has been kind of big across the nation.
Yeah.
I think there's 24 states right now.
Yeah,
have.
I did read that there was a
Right?
number of states, and the person that the lady that introduced that's one of the reasons she introduced it. There was a lot of
Yeah.
states that had it, and
I think
wondered why
Vermont.
we didn't.
I think Vermont was the first,
Yeah,
weren't they?
yeah. I'm not sure which one. Was
That's
first,
been a
but-
long-standing thing in Vermont.
Yeah.
Florida, I think, has been the most recent one that's added
Yeah.
the constitutional right to hunt and fish. So let's talk about the $5 increase to
Yeah,
licenses.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about that too, Paul. It actually the what I read, it said $7, $6 going to the fisheries, and then $1
Yeah.
for boat launches or whatever. So
But I get the actual bill here.
yeah,
So of course they can pass the buck on to sportsmen,
right.
and so they're going to increase fishing license fees, and which I don't mind paying more if it depends on what it's going to be used for.
Right.
There's always a big, for me, it's always like, well, have you really trimmed all the fat that you can trim off before you start?
Right.
So you get two ways to manage your budget. You either spend less or bring in more money.
Right.
And you always wonder, has everything really been addressed?
Right. Are you
You
as
know.
efficient as can be?
Yeah. And it was interesting. So I watched some of the debates, and it was pretty cool. Like one of the things that they were discussing is there was a representative there who sounds like he was a contractor, operates an excavator and stuff. One of the things that the state wanted to do was buy a new excavator.
Mm.
And he was kind of like, the current excavator that the state owns has 5,000 hours on it. And he's like, the excavator I use every day. And I think he had said 9,000 hours.
Right.
And he goes, I have no issues with it. And he was, $250,000 for a new excavator.
The
Is that
difference
really a
between
necessity?
The private sector and government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I kind of agree with that. It's like, yeah, is there going to be a direct, are outdoorsmen going to see the direct
benefit
to,
Right.
a $5 increase, which to some it doesn't sound like much, but
Yeah.
maybe to a lot of people, that would be make or break whether they're going to buy a license or not.
Yeah.
But you were talking, it's been a long time since they've increased.
It has.
License
Yeah.
fees.
They gave one guy wrote in, gave the example, if you wanted to go fish at the Derby in Long Lake, let's say it's $20 or
Yeah.
whatever for a weekend. And the cost of a seasonal resident fishing license is, I think, $25 or something like that, Paul.
Yeah.
We'll think nothing of spending $20 to go fish for a weekend.
No.
And
When I originally read it, I'm like, $5 increase. I don't mind if it's going to be
Right.
going to a good, but if it's just going to be pissed away, for
Right.
lack of a better word,
you would want them to be good stewards with your money,
like,
with your money.
yeah,
It's not their money. It's
like
our money.
I have no problem spending
Yeah.
a lot more money on a fishing license
Right.
if it's going to be utilized correctly. But
Yeah.
we're just going to buy a bunch of stuff, and sportsmen really aren't going to see. I mean,
Right.
that excavator was one of the examples that I just was like, oh,
Yeah.
come on.
Yeah.
Like,
So oftentimes up front, and people make that argument, well, it's a heck of a deal and but you like to know the story behind the
Yep.
story, because sometimes the game you're watching is not the game that's being played.
no,
So, yeah.
no. And I think, I'm not on the inside of this, but like wardens, they work a lot of hours,
They do.
and I
They
feel
do.
like some of that money could be used towards staffing.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if that was being addressed or not there. But,
Right.
I can remember some wardens covering quite an area, covering for
Yeah.
other guys.
Yeah.
Covering different regions.
They always have, Paul. And I think back in the day, it was even much more so than it is today.
Yeah.
They're more regulated on how many hours they work and things like that.
Well,
Back in the day, it was
all the time.
24/7.
He got called all the time.
Yeah.
And I brought that up with a warden who had recently retired. And he was like, yeah, it still was the same.
Yeah.
It was, you just
They find ways around
on
it.
books.
Yep.
He goes, it was like, you're working these.
Yeah,
but
they
he's
find
like,
ways around it.
you were basically called
Yeah.
all the time, no matter what.
Yeah.
He was just,
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah. So, I mean, $5 increase in licenses, I don't mind if it's going to be utilized in a good fashion. If it's just going to be.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of funny. I was mentioning that, Paul. It really, I don't know how, I don't believe it would affect me. I'm a lifetime license holder, so I think I'm locked in for life.
Yeah,
now.
my kids are too.
And your kids are and
my
stuff.
Kids are too.
So, not that things can't change. I mean, you never want to say never,
but you know, it's the glaring thing with me is I always think of, it's hard enough to get people out there to go fishing and hunting as it is, especially young people right now. And I've said it time and time again, there's so many things vying for their time that they're not doing it. And anything that can be a barrier to entry,
or
that increases the barrier to entry, even if it's a few bucks, I think it needs to really be thought about before doing it.
Yeah.
But yeah, personally, I wouldn't care just as long as it's being used right.
Yeah, you're right. That would be the last thing that would stop us from.
Yeah, I mean,
we would think nothing of forking over $5 more to fish for the season and stuff, and I guess the bottom line is I think that has a really good chance of passing.
Sounds
Paul.
it. Yeah,
I think that usually you can get a feel for what's gonna. And we'll talk about the other bills here in a minute, but you can get a feel for what's has a really good chance of going through, and I think that one is probably pretty much a shoe-in.
Yep.
And it's good that some people, like you talked about the contractor in the legislature, that it's good to ask questions and be challenged on that stuff too. You don't want to just assume that. You're giving more money to something and it's going to be used wisely or whatever.
Well, if you just back things up, government's big, but you just look at your own household budget.
That's how we live.
You've got two options.
Yeah.
You can bring in more money or you can
spend less.
Yeah. There's two ways you can go about it.
Yeah.
And sometimes bringing in more money isn't always the best.
Right.
The best use of your time and resources.
Right.
If you're just wasting a bunch of money on random stuff, which a lot of people do.
Yeah, I think we've gotten way more into that. I think as the generations of today's generation is I don't want to say much more wasteful, but I guess that would be.
Well, it's so easy to subscribe to random stuff and then completely forget about it.
Yeah.
And you're paying for like an automatic subscription every month that you're not even using.
Yeah.
And when you start digging down into that stuff, you can start man, I can save
but
a
we're
couple $100 here, a couple $100 there.
Consumer oriented and stuff, that we will buy things that, do we really need it?
Yeah.
But I mean, it's the way society is with commercials and how we're influenced and stuff. And, people have fallen into that trap that they think they need things that they really probably don't need. Bigger and better.
So there was a Sunday hunting bill, which we've talked about Sunday hunting before.
Yeah, that's always that.
That was LD 439.
So you can see this is they're trying to take a new path into.
They are, and I didn't agree with it. I was like, well, I mean, this opens up more potential problems than it's worth.
Yeah, and you can see that we talked about LD 77 having a good chance of passing. I think, the LD 439 is it, Paul? I think the prospects of that passing are not good.
And so, if I go back a few years, I probably was like, and it was for selfish reasons. I really would have been like, oh man, we need to have Sunday hunting, because there's guys that work 6 days a week, or if they just work 5 days a week, they get basically 4-5 days a month to deer hunt, or something like that. But then we've had conversations about it and you kind of look at it from maybe someone who runs a lodge or a guide, or even us going to deer camp. it's like those Sundays are actually some of the best days.
Yeah.
Because you're not pressured to do anything, and you can enjoy the whole process. So I'm probably less of an advocate for. I'm not. Yeah,
and I'm not a big advocate for it myself for selfish reasons, because I'm retired and I can literally hunt, 6 days a week if I want to. So the Sunday, having that extra day is not an issue for me, where I don't work. But that being said, I would have no problem if it passed. I mean, if we had Sunday hunting in Maine, I think the arguments against it aren't that good. I read a lot of the comments on that, and people wrote that, and you hear this one all the time, is there one day to go hiking, in the woods without being in, and it's like, these people are in more danger getting in their vehicle going to a spot to hike than they are from a hunter.
Yeah.
And, if I was a hiker or a bird watcher, I can literally do that 7 days a week. There's nobody telling me I can't do it one day a week.
And it's not just that. On Sunday during hunting season, a lot of people will take that day to go shoot.
Right, exactly. So you can go out and shoot in the woods.
There's still people shooting.
Yeah.
Probably more.
More
so.
I disagree with that line of thinking, but you see that a lot in southern Maine, and some of the comments I read, you could see they said, "Well, I'm not against hunting," but if you read the comments, they really are.
Yeah,
they're really anti-hunting, but they're trying to make it sound like they're not.
Yeah.
Give the animals a break for one day a week or whatever, and it's like, yeah. But yeah, like I say, if it passed, I wouldn't have a problem with it. I could live with it.
I will say, because if there was Sunday hunting, I would feel a little more pressure to. Yeah. Oh, I got to be out there. I got to.
Yeah, I actually wouldn't, because I generally, Paul, I hunt. I mean, if it snowed, I would.
Yeah.
If it snowed Saturday night into Sunday morning, I'd be out there.
Yeah.
But as it stands right now, like I say, I'm retired. I can hunt when I want, and I generally take the weekends off anyway, Saturday and Sunday.
They're busier.
They're busier, and I got stuff to do. I do have, and so even though it may be open, I still don't have to go.
Yeah.
And I can still take a day or two off. And
I think that'd still be hard for me.
Yeah.
Because when we go to deer camp, it's if you're driving into deer camp for the week and you're going in on Sunday and there was snow, I just would be.
You're chomping at the bit. Yeah.
I got to hurry up and get in there, get my stuff unloaded because I want to get out. And it forces me now to go in.
Yeah.
Kind of enjoy because we always have a nice meal.
Yeah.
On Sunday.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, I mean, I guess I don't care either way. But
right, it's not
the big thing that comes up a lot too is landowners.
That's
you may lose access to.
Yeah, I did read that, Paul, in the Woodland Owners Association, where they were against it, and they have a lot of clout and a lot of power. So I think the odds of that going through are not good.
But so we haven't talked about the big caveat though with this bill. It was to allow youth to hunt.
Well, that was their angle on this.
On Sunday,
Yeah, that was their angle.
Which I was like, wow, man, that kind of makes it even more complicated as far as.
Because I didn't read in the bill, so a youth has to go, it said under 18, so anybody under 16 has to be with an adult.
By an adult.
So would the adult be hunting? Would they just be chaperoning? You know,
there was a lot of.
Yeah.
You can just see where it could really complicate things a lot.
That wasn't really clarified in what I read.
Yeah, I'm trying to recall
how that would work out. So
I think they had to have a junior hunting license. But I think there's enough opportunity on Youth Day.
Yeah.
To get
they didn't have to have a junior license, did they? Because it was anybody under 18, and
I think
from
it was
16 to 18, you have an adult license. And
I think it was a junior hunting license or under the age of 18 if you went to a secondary school.
Okay.
Whatever that means.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was some other.
Yeah.
But yeah, the age 18 was definitely in there. I didn't print that one off.
Yeah.
I probably.
Yeah, it was, you had to be under 18.
Yeah.
So basically 17 down. So.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like, well, man, that kind of complicates things. Because yeah, you got to bring your kid out, but you can't hunt. But
right, but they
you
can
could see where people would play that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, that's not going to happen.
I read there again. I read some of the comments, and not that I agree with the comments or whatever, but yeah, and like I say, the Woodland Owners Association was against it, and
they had LD 820, constitutional right to hunt and fish.
Yeah,
which I'm a big proponent of. I think most people
that
hunt and fish are. There was one rep there. She was arguing against it. She was Representative Roberts out of southern part of the state, I think York County, place down around there. And she said that was already in the Constitution by
procuring food.
Yeah,
because they had passed that a while back, and that kind of included hunting.
Yeah,
so
that's too vague.
Yeah.
That's
I
think having something explicit that
So that will have a tough time, Paul. So that being amending the Constitution would have to.
It'd have to be voted on by us.
Referendum in November, and that would have to get to the referendum. It would need 2/3 of the legislature.
Correct. 2/3 of those were present, I believe.
Yeah.
There. So I think it goes that was in the House, go to the Senate, then back to the House, for 2/3 vote, and then be presented to the people to.
Right.
I think most people in the state would be for it.
Yeah.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
I can't imagine not. But yeah, we mentioned there's 24 states that have that in their constitution.
Right.
And I think it's important to specify that, to delineate that. And I think the way it's worded is.
So the state would still have control over laws and stuff.
There's still with reasonable restrictions. I think
they would control it like they do now with laws and regulations and stuff. Hunting and fishing, but it would just be that it would be in the Constitution that we have a right to do it, and so
I think the argument against it was well, then you have people that say, well, if I have a right to hunt and fish, then they start going after the Sunday hunting and fishing or hunting. Well, it's Sunday, I have a right to hunt and fish, even though it's Sunday. You start.
Yeah, but that's already really been addressed with the procuring food that, because like I say, the state can still have jurisdiction, as far as regulating how we do it and stuff.
I hope it happens.
Yeah.
That'd be a good thing. Anything that's a positive for hunting and fishing. Some people think that it's going to create unwanted attention to hunting. I don't think so.
Yeah.
No, I don't think there's much to back that up.
I would say, my own personal opinion. Yeah, that should, I would have no problem if that was passed. But I think, like I say, the difficult part there is you're going to need 2/3 of the legislature to get it even to a referendum.
Yeah.
On the ballot in November.
See, you said you didn't watch them.
I didn't watch any of the. No. I read on them a little bit and stuff, Paul, and to see, and like I say, you get a pretty good feel. And in the Sunday hunting thing, Bill, that's been tossed back and forth, and it's never really gained a lot of traction.
No.
So I just assume, and it looked like it was just trying to
kind of a Hail Mary,
right? A new angle with, putting kids in there, to make it a little more attractive. To
use the kids.
Nobody wants to go against the kids. So.
But so I was watching it, and a lot of it's kind of tough to watch because I don't know. A lot of the reps, they seem nervous. But they seem like they're a nervous wreck.
Yeah.
Talking. All of them. The representative Drinkwater, he's well spoken.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing is he kind of told a quick little story there about, sounds like he's a deer hunter. When he was younger, they used to bring 2 school buses up into the North Maine woods, deer hunting out of.
Yeah.
So that caught my attention, and I kind of was like, well, I just want to hear more about the school buses.
Yeah.
up in the woods. And he was joking around. He said, when he was kind of laying out his argument,
yeah,
he was using this as an example of where he's coming from. And he said they had 2 school buses that they hunted out of. One was a Christian bus and one was a heathen bus. He goes, and I won't tell you which one I was on. But I was like, yeah, okay, enough with the legal
politics.
Stuff.
Yeah,
I want to hear more about
We'll talk about deer hunting.
The deer hunting from the buses.
Yeah, I'd be the same way, Paul. There's a lot going on right now that beyond the hunting and fishing, and there's a big uproar in unorganized territory and camps and stuff and houses on lakes with the taxes, the real estate taxes.
Oh,
yeah, they're going through the roof.
I can imagine.
Yeah, this year.
I can imagine.
And I've had people talk to me, other camp owners and in the unorganized territories, and they're all up in arms. And it's like, what are you going to do?
Yeah,
they can do anything with the stroke of a pen.
Yeah,
and there's nothing really you can complain, but all they got to do is write a number on a piece of paper.
Taxes, you get
taxed. It can be anything they want it to be, and there's literally very little you can do about it.
You get taxed on your income, then you get taxed on whatever you buy with the income that you have left over, and then you own stuff.
Yeah, we're not talking a little, jump. We're talking a major.
Fort Fairfield did it last year.
Yeah, Prescal did.
God.
Yeah. My mom's house went up 33%, I think, in 1 year.
Yeah.
In 1 year. And they're doing it everywhere. And that's why they're doing it in the unorganized territories. Like I said, they can come in and say, well, today your property and your building are worth this amount. So it
begs the question, do you actually own it? You
never
feel like you fully actually, I own it. But then you're telling me I got to, quote unquote, almost pay rent.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a very hard time with how we've gotten to this point in society. And it happened years ago on the coast where they, real estate property prices went through the roof, and they priced the locals right out of their, their oceanfront houses. And, I told Narda that, my wife, I said that basically, they can do that.
Yeah.
And there's, I don't know what recourse a person has. I mean, they set up things that you can contest it or whatever, but
it's
pretty hard to fight City Hall.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I'm going to waste my breath.
Might not be worth it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, that brings in, talk about unorganized territories and money does a lot of the talking in society.
Oh,
it was a driving force.
Yeah.
Someone asked me about there's a issue with spruce budworm up here, kind of on the northwestern border between Maine and Quebec, and then St. John Valley.
It's literally at our camp.
So there was some people that had emailed me that they're in what they call the hot spot.
Yeah, well, I am.
Yeah. So they, he was asking what my thoughts were on the stuff that they use to spray, and it's funny. So I'm not in that realm of things. I'm not that well versed in insecticides or pesticides or herbicides, stuff like that. But there's a crossover to my profession on how that stuff works. There's a mechanism of action behind it, and there's a kind of a way you go about it to achieve your goal. And So right now, spruce budworm it's a larvae. It's basically a moth.
Right.
That's quite common. And what happens is it eats the needles and stuff, the foliage from fir and spruce.
The new this year's growth.
And if they're at normal levels, it's not an issue.
Right.
But if you have, and I guess it's cyclical, every 40 years or so.
Yeah, they said, about 40 years.
You'll get this explosion of spruce budworm, and it will kill the trees, which we've got a lot of industrial forests up here.
Right.
And
it's a lot of money.
If your trees die, it's
a lot of money.
You're losing money. And I understand that. I can relate to that because out back here, I've got 17 acres out back. That's all popple. And there was a really good market for popple. Maybe there still is. I don't know. I haven't kept up on it. But out of 5 or 10 years ago, I was kind of contemplating. I'm like, I got a lot of big popple. Maybe I should.
Now's the time to do it while you still own your house.
Have that cut, right? Well, the problem is we'd get some windstorms and I'd see, 3 or 4, and I'm like, oh man, that's like lost money there laying on the ground.
Yeah.
But I never could really come to the ability to do it because I like having woods there as opposed to just seeing it completely leveled. So it never was the financial benefit.
Right.
Didn't really outweigh the aesthetics of it. So I never really could pull the trigger on it. But I can understand how, you've got a forest, there's money.
Yeah.
There's an investment there. It's worth X number of dollars and you're seeing it destroyed. You get one of two things. You want to get rid of the problem and or harvest it before it's gone, which is kind of what they're doing with a lot of areas is they're cutting pretty heavily.
They're cutting real hard up there. Yeah. So do you know the chemical? I know back in the 80s, 70s or 80s, Paul, I think they used a chemical called Savin.
Well, so right now, there's 2 that they use. One is, it's a brand name Mimic. It's tebufenazide, which is it's a synthetic insecticide. And what it does is so the larvae have to eat it, so they have to ingest it, and it causes premature molting in the larvae. And then it's narrow spectrum. We'll touch on narrow spectrum versus broad spectrum stuff and kind of what that is and why you'd want that. And then the other one was BTK, which is an organic insecticide. Comes from the bacterium from the soil. They ingest it, and it basically messes up the gut of the larvae. And so their idea behind it is it's specific to Lepidoptera, which are, if you remember taxonomy from basic biology, you had, kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, and species. So Lepidoptera is the order of basically caterpillars. So it's specific to those species that fall under that order. But the problem is that first thing that came to my mind was, well, the state has, 100, 120 species of caterpillars. So it may not affect other animals, birds, stuff like that. But what about other caterpillars, other moths, butterflies?
Butterflies, yeah.
Right?
Moths, yeah.
So it's narrow enough, narrow spectrum, which means whenever you treat something like this, because we do it in medicine, is you want a pretty specific target. And the more specific target you can get, the better. The better. So in other words, if there's an organism that has something unique only to that organism that you can target to take care of it, then you basically limit what they call collateral damage. You're not going to damage other things because they don't use that same method of reproduction,
right,
or that method to survive, whatever it may be. Cell division would be one with cancers. So if you can target something specifically that's specific to what you want to take care of, then great. But if a broad spectrum would be something that every organism uses to reproduce or to survive. And if you do, something like that, going to have a lot of collateral damage. You're going to hurt a lot of animals. So, yeah. So someone had asked, you know, am I concerned about it? And I'm always concerned when there's money involved.
Right.
Because they can say it's safe and effective, which we've heard that before.
Well,
right. It's safe and effective.
Because originally, Paul, they used DDT for that.
Yeah.
Did you know that for spruce budworm?
Yeah.
Back in the late 50s, early 60s, DDT was their insecticide that they used to take care. And yeah.
And as we know, weakened the shells of eagles and they couldn't, which almost devastated our eagle population.
Yeah.
Which is now
thriving.
My God. They're over the house here all the time.
Yeah. There's eagles everywhere.
Actually, quick side note on eagles. I was sitting on the deck 2-3 days ago, the nice day we had.
Yeah.
And I look way up in the sky. And way high, you see an eagle.
Yeah.
Just kind of soaring around. Kids were sitting with me. I'm like, oh, look, guys, there's an eagle. It was like the second one we saw that day.
Yeah.
And then it was crazy. Must be a nest out back. Crows.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden, the eagle was high. All of a sudden, he kind of tucked his wings in and his legs went right down. And he went a lot. I mean, he was really high. And he disappeared behind the trees. Pretty soon, here comes this eagle up out of the woods, right over my deck.
Yeah.
With a crow right on his rear end.
Oh, no, yeah.
And he didn't have anything in his, but he must have saw.
Yeah.
I'm assuming it was a crow's nest.
Yeah.
And went down to,
yeah.
But anyway, yeah, there's eagles everywhere now.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I mean, I don't know the details of the literature on the safety. I know what they'll tell us because there's $750 million at stake.
Yeah.
Like almost $800 million worth of.
Exactly. Less than 700 and something.
785
something million dollars for the value of the lumber that they're,
So when there's that much money involved.
Yeah.
Obviously we know it's effective. You can take care of something effectively, but safety in this realm of things can start to have a different meaning when there's that much money involved.
Yeah. Yeah.
Things will be.
Yeah. Transparency and honesty sometimes, like you say, when there's money involved, go out the window and I'm a cynic when it,
I am too. And we've seen it time and time again.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, this isn't as a public health issue like we had back in 2019, but I was on the right side of history.
Yeah.
In that issue.
Yeah,
and
so was I.
While everybody's going on about, you start kind of.
So was I.
Logically.
And I had no scientific background and stuff. I just had a little bit of common sense and, a little critical thinking.
And there's a lot of smart people that just kind of drank the Kool-Aid and went along with it.
Crap.
And here we are today.
Yeah, knowing what we know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And my stance hasn't changed.
Nope.
Neither's mine. Nothing's different.
Neither's mine. And a lot of the stuff that we thought was true from the beginning of where it came from proved to be true.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And we had scientists telling us it didn't, and only to control a narrative.
Yeah. Well, it was either one or two things. And I kept saying this the entire time. Either the person's a complete idiot or they're lying. It's one of the two.
Yeah.
But yeah, so anyway, with this, with spraying, I mean, it's human risk, I think, is minimal.
Yeah.
Don't quote me on it because I haven't.
Right.
It takes a lot of digging nowadays to really tease out, unless you live it. And I don't live in this realm of
science,
work. Right? I don't.
So one of the things and there again, I have no scientific background or way of proving this, but what we've seen in the last 40 or 50 years Yeah, and I'll give you one example of insect activity: the Hexagenia limbata, the hex hatch on those lakes up there in the Fish River chain of lakes. When I was young, they were enormous.
Yeah,
they're non-existent basically now.
Yeah, and that's
what changed? How did that happen? Well, when they're telling me they're dumping insecticides, and they're saying, well, we're staying 100 feet away from the water. Listen, that stuff's getting in the water system.
Yeah. And
water flows downhill into the, and
from what I know with this stuff, and I'm not wrecking on the landowners that are doing it, because I understand they've got a, vested interest in trying to preserve what they have. And I get that. But time and time again, we've seen where, you get the scientist or the authority will say, like for this, it says that a lot of these different chemicals get tied up in the soil and therefore don't get washed into the water system. And I'm like, prove it.
Right.
Like,
I have a hard time believing that, knowing that, like I say, everything flows downhill, and the lake is where it's headed.
Because nature, it's a complex system, just like the human body is a complex system. There's a lot of interplay between things, and there's a lot of things we don't know what we don't know.
Right.
A human health standpoint,
I'm not going to drink a glass of it.
I don't know. I think we expose ourselves to worse stuff every day.
Yeah.
Because of the mechanism of action of these insecticides. Doesn't kill by contact.
Yeah.
Seems to, target a relatively specific order.
Yeah.
But it would be about downstream, like, other
insects,
butterflies and even, you get into, like mayflies and stuff like that.
Yeah, like I say,
it's kind of a different.
So something has happened in our environment. Area. It may not be that. It may not be. I have no idea. I can't. But something has happened, like I say, where the Hexagenia have all but disappeared from our waterways up there, and
you wonder, agriculture.
Absolutely, they're putting insecticides on their plants and stuff. You're absolutely correct. And there's a lot of that around some of the waterways that, and there again, that stuff gets washed into the brook, which gets carried into the lake, and
it's when there's that much money at stake, it's easy to be like, oh no, there's no problem. It's
money and jobs,
nothing's gonna,
people's lives,
nothing's gonna happen. But it's always good to be just real and honest about it.
Yeah, and ask questions.
Yeah.
That was one of the things. Getting back to 2,000 people, science wants to be questioned.
It has to be.
It has to be questioned.
It's the way it works.
It's not science if it's not questioned and tested.
If you're a scientist and you do an experiment, you want someone else to be able to do the experiment and replicate what you did
and prove you were right.
That validates. If someone else can sit down and do what you did, it validates what you did even further.
Right.
And you'll see people publish things, and they'll try to hide their methodology. There were some studies with some treatment modalities during the pandemic that they were doing weird stuff as far as, like, you don't publish a paper and only put the results out there.
Right.
When you publish, a peer-reviewed piece of literature, you got everything from, the big thing is the methods. What was your methodology to get to this point?
Yeah.
And they were doing things like withholding, only publishing parts of the paper.
Yeah.
And that right there ought to be just a huge red flag. And a lot of people were just okay with it.
Yeah.
Like, oh, look at the results of this. Well, hold on here.
Yeah.
We don't know how they even got to the results. So we can't validate it. So you'll find when people don't want their experiment replicated, that ought to be a concern.
Yep. And transparency. When there is no transparency, that raises a lot of red flags and stuff. And you want to be open and transparent, and and want to be questioned. I trust that person.
Yeah.
I don't trust the person that just says, trust me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When there's a lot of money at stake.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, I guess that's my stance on it. I don't know the exact answer on how safe it is. But I do understand the approach.
Yeah.
On how, how
we
you
hope
treat
what we're
something
being
and
told is correct.
Yeah.
And like you say, we understand why they want to do this. And it like I say, I don't want all the spruce trees all around up there dead either.
No,
it'd be a fire hazard and everything else. And
we're lucky enough to be able to use the land.
Yeah. And
so they could be able to make money on the land.
Absolutely.
And in order for it to continue to be there.
Right.
So it can't be just a one-way street.
Right.
Right. Yeah, I would want to protect my investment.
Yeah.
Big time.
Yeah.
And I would probably push the envelope to protect my investment.
Yeah.
As much as I could get away with.
Yeah.
As long as it didn't hurt somebody or.
My wife has more trust issues than I do. She didn't want to be up there while they were spraying. I didn't worry about it too much because we've lived in a farming community where they've dumped chemicals. They sprayed chemicals. I told her that. I said, Narda, we've lived in a farming community since we were born, and they've been dumping chemicals and spraying for insecticides, pesticides since we were kids.
You still want to minimize your exposure to that stuff.
Yeah.
But
But I didn't worry about it too much. I'm still at the lake.
Worrying about it will kill you more faster than probably the stuff itself. So.
Yeah, we're still there.
But I definitely can understand someone's concern.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
That's kind of how the world works.
Like I say, you can find out too late when things can really go south and in certain situations and it's too late, to.
Yeah, there's no one doing what you've done wrong sometimes. Just learn and move on.
Yeah.
But hopefully we won't have to deal with that for another 40 years.
40 years, yeah. Yeah. Well, like I say, it's very relevant to us because it's where we live and recreate.
Yeah.
They're spraying right where we live and recreate right now.
Yeah. So hopefully it gets it under control. And they've cut like crazy.
They've cut a lot of woods for sure.
And I don't
ran into George. He was talking to me at church this morning, and he brought that right up. He says, I was up by your camp the other day. He said, man, they've really leveled the forest. I said, yeah. I said, I'm not sure, but I think it was because of the spruce budworm or whatever they were.
And then you got people that, they'll argue that, well, they're just using that as an excuse to harvest like willy-nilly. It's like, well, maybe, but.
Yeah, that can happen.
Again, it's their land.
Yeah. Yeah, that can happen. Yeah.
I'm sure they could come up with a better excuse to.
Yeah.
To whack off all their trees, but.
Yeah.
It's still their land.
Excuse me. Yeah.
But. Yeah, it's kind of hard to look at sometimes when you see it.
It is.
Just devastating.
It is.
But I don't own it, so I can't make that.
No. Like you say, we do appreciate those people who have that land. That they do leave it open for us to recreate on, and they do.
Yeah, they do.
So,
yeah, very fortunate.
Yeah,
Maine's we're very lucky in the state to have the access that we have access to.
Yeah,
or the land that we have access to.
Yeah.
So there, a lot of stuff going on in the state.
Yeah, we get and I'm sure I never talked to you about this, but the moose lottery's coming up here in 3 weeks. Narda's in.
Is she?
Yeah, I'm not.
You can't.
Yeah, cousin Nancy's in and Narda's in.
Geez.
So, yeah.
When's the application deadline?
I think it's passed.
Okay. Yeah, it has.
Yeah, I think you're out of the game.
Oh darn!
You got to be in it to win it, Paul.
Yep.
I never even mentioned it to you. I figured, well, I've told him years past, and so
I'm good on the moose hunt. It's not.
Yeah, well, Narda's in it, but she was drawn in 2018, so the odds of her getting drawn this year are slim to none, which is all right.
Well, there's 0 for me, so
Yeah, I got some relatives from out of state that applied, and I told them they could stay at the camp if they get drawn. But the odds of them getting drawn are slim to none. Your cousin Josh there.
I thought he was going to come out and go deer hunting or something last year.
Yeah, he's talked about that. He may come up sometime and do that. He loves to hunt.
Yep.
Other than that, in the state, the big deal with it right now, Paul, is like I say, the taxes.
Yeah.
Real estate taxes up here in the unorganized territory and everywhere in towns and stuff, but in unorganized territories and stuff is going through the roof and get a lot of people up in arms.
Yeah. Well, we get some dry fly fishing is going to start up here pretty soon.
Absolutely.
I bet you locally I could.
Yeah.
I could probably, but I think the next week the canoe is going to be done. I'm hoping this week.
Yeah. And, one of the things, and there again, we keep our eye on even things that are 6 months down the road, and we had from the middle of May until the 2 week stretch there. It was cold and wet. And I was a little concerned with the grouse situation there. I had somebody mention that to me. An appraiser out of Washburn, and it was on my mind when he mentioned it to me, and I told him the same thing. I said, we've had a lot of cold. It rained and was cold for quite a stretch there from the middle to late May, and we actually had at the camp, we had a little bird nesting by the camp, and the nest failed.
Oh, no way.
Yeah. We stopped seeing the bird come out of the nest, and Narda went and checked it, and there was eggs in it, but no mom.
I still hear that day we saw the eagle actually out back. There was a bird out back drumming.
Was there?
Yeah. I was sitting on the deck and I was like, that is a partridge out there.
Yeah. So I'm a little concerned about that there may be some loss to cold, wet weather here.
Well, time will tell.
Time will tell that. I was just going to say that time will tell that.
Sure will. So get things squared away this week. I got a chicken coop to build, and then
canoe to finish.
And
chicken coop to build, and
do some dry fly fishing.
Yeah. Well, I'll go up with you when you're ready.
Probably not this Monday, but the following Monday.
Yeah. Well, we have a little more flexibility on that now. That's right. So what we want to do is make sure we're not up there when it's pouring, raining, and 50 degrees. So we can pick a stretch of weather that looks good.
I'm gonna do a couple stretches. Whatever nice days I can get every week.
Well, maybe, Paul,
because there's some ponds that I want to fish that I've never been able to get into. Yeah. There's one that we've talked about that I'm gonna go into this year.
Yeah. Well, I'm all in.
I'm going, and I've got it pinned on Onyx.
But maybe we can do a early July trip and try to hit that hex hatch up there in the big woods and stuff. I've always wanted to do that and never have. Yeah.
Alrighty. Yeah, that's interesting stuff. And I want to thank Gary Drinkwater.
Yes.
For pointing me in that direction. He always comments on stuff and leaves some good insight. And I'd like to hear more about his buses that he deer hunted out of. that was the most interesting thing I'm sure everybody sitting in that room could have cared less, but
that's what piqued your interest. Yeah.
Let's stop talking about politics and let's talk about the
deer hunting.
The two buses that were deer hunted out of. Yeah. Pretty cool. That was something I always wanted to do when I was younger, but alrighty. Guess that's it.
That's it.
All right. I guess till next time, get outside.
It's good for the soul.
See ya.